Hello, everybody, and welcome to the stream. Today, I am excited to be sharing about how to post to WordPress directly, since currently the stream is broken, or the action is broken, but we've got Jason Snell on. So, Jason, hello.
Hello, it's good to be here. I get to explain my madness to you and share it with other people so that they can see how you can use old technology to break through when your automations break.
Well, it's perfect timing for me because that action being broken is preventing me from uploading about 600 shortcuts to my website. So
It's the worst. It's the worst when that happens. I hate it. I hate when automations break.
and also my secret goal is to convince WordPress to add their own shortcuts or shortcut action support. So do you want to share for anybody who doesn't know about what you do and everything
Sure.
like that?
I write about Apple stuff and tech stuff and the podcast about it over at sixcolors.com. You can read my stuff, and I host a bunch of podcasts, including Upgrade on Relay FM. And back in the day, I worked at Macworld for like more than a decade, 2 decades. And my automation claim to fame will be that I'm the one who got Steve Jobs to say that Mac OS X would have AppleScript in it.
Nice.
When nobody knew whether that would actually happen, and I asked him at a back when Apple actually took questions from the audience at their events, at their press conferences, and I said, "Is it going to have AppleScript support?" And he said, "Of course." And what Sal and others have told me is that somebody like ran into the scripting offices and where all the developers were and was like, "Did you hear what Steve Jobs just said? We're in. We're in." So I'm going to take that as my scripting claim to fame, that I got Jobs to actually commit to it publicly.
Well, I appreciate it. And I'm just, this isn't even about this stream, but I'm just now getting into AppleScript for the very first time because of Shortcuts for Mac.
Oh, whoa, don't do it to yourself.
Yeah. Well, of course, in classic me style, I'm using it to automate Shortcuts itself and all that. So
yeah, that's the way to do it. I think all of us this summer who've been playing with Shortcuts on the Mac have been doing all of those games of like, can I run a shell script that runs a shortcut that runs an Apple script that controls shortcuts that tells it to run a shell script, and like just have it just spin and spin and spin. And you can. That's the good news. You can.
I think you can even SSH into the computer that you're using Shortcuts, or does it fail? I don't think I
haven't tried that, because you could just do a shell script at that point.
Exactly.
It's possible. Yeah.
So yeah, today we were talking, basically this is based off of, I mean, you were just on Automators talking about all of these shortcuts that you shared, but a couple months ago you shared basically your main set of uploading to 6colors using, it's the XML-RPC protocol. Is protocol in the name? I don't know if that's one of those.
I think it's the XML-RPC interface is how it's officially referred to. And basically, okay, the story is that in the early days of blogging, all the blogging tools came out and they had their web hosting interfaces, but they were rudimentary, and people were like, hey, I would like to use an app, or theoretically a script, but mostly it was, I would like to use an app to post to my blog instead of using your web interface. And so I think maybe it originated with movable type, but in the end it was sort of a standard where blogging tools, movable type, and WordPress probably adopted it because it already existed with movable type. I don't know for sure, but that's probably what happened, because they wanted to also be compatible with those blog posting tools. And the one that still remains that you can find that actually is very useful sometimes for building these automations is Mars Edit from Red Sweater Software. Nice. It's a Mac app that is a blogging tool that will use XML-RPC. And the way it works, honestly, if you think about it, it's kind of a very modern way of interfacing with the back end, which is it sends XML files. At the time, I think it was, people were like, well, why don't you just embed things in a URL and put them in? And it's like, no, we're going to use this XML interface. And so basically you can send an XML file to WordPress or movable type, which I started on. My site started on movable type, and it took me almost no time to make my shortcuts work with WordPress when I moved. Nice. Because WordPress has the same, like the codes for my categories of my posts changed, right? But it was so minor, the changes that I had to make to my shortcuts to get them to work on WordPress. So you send an XML file to the server and say, here, and it's like, here's a new post. And then it sends you an XML file back that says, great, here's the ID for the new post.
Nice.
And that's it. And you can say, here's a new image. And it says, great, here's the ID and all the information about the new image. And now it's in there.
Nice.
And so when it works, it's great because basically you're just remote controlling the blogging tool based entirely on exchanging XML back and forth.
Nice. That sounds great. I mean, and at least I
Sounds simple, doesn't it?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I was just thinking, I come in from such a reverse angle from like where it actually originated, because I've learned through shortcuts and tools like that, and then going through other APIs using stuff like JSON. So it's pretty similar, except that it's a file itself instead of maybe just the text. I guess it all ends up being a file at some point.
Right. And it's true. I said it was modern, but I think you're right that today it would probably be a JSON file and not an XML file. But, it's an XML file. What you going to do?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's one of the parts where I'm just like, I don't ever work with XML, and I'm sure it's very similar, but it's kind of just like unstructured, it seems like, compared to the structured. Or it's still, it has a structure, but not as like literal.
It's super structured, but in a freeform way. It's anyway, yeah, exactly. It is its own thing. And when I mentioned we're going to be looking at some XML here, and don't think that I have this XML in my head. Totally. When I mentioned MarsEdit, one of the great things about Daniel Jalkut's app MarsEdit is it has a window called Network Log.
Ooh,
and when you use MarsEdit to post something to a blogging tool,
oh man. Okay. Let me just show it. It shows you
the XML that it posts. So you can see. You may not want to show it because it may have your password in
call.
it.
I switched back.
I'm not sure.
Luckily, I just went to the wrong browser. So
I'm not sure whether it obscures the it may obscure the password. It may be smart enough to do that. But it's it will lay out exactly everything that's happening with the network transfer.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's huge. Because it means, it does obscure the password, actually. Okay. And so when I built these automations for the first time, I just used MarsEdit as my guide. I would do it in MarsEdit, and then I said, okay, this is what the XML needs to look like. And it'll let you save it to a file like that whole log, and you can see everything that's happening when it's talking back and forth to the server. So it's basically like a debug mode. It's just there in the MarsEdit interface if you want to look at it. But that lays bare what is happening when a blogging app is talking to the server.
Nice. I think that was one of my major questions that I feel like happens all the time with shortcuts, is just how did you even figure out the very beginning of this? And so this makes a ton of sense, because then you can... if I have any custom stuff that is necessary, I can add it in here and post it.
That's the trick, is that assuming that MarsEdit supports the custom stuff, but like custom fields or tags are the ones that always stuck with me. Is like, well, how do you format a custom field? And the answer is that a lot of them have ID numbers. And so what you see is not, and so you end up saying, oh, well, if it's this, then make it this ID number. And you do it that way. And it works. It works. And then there are quirks about like, am I posting it as a draft or am I posting it live?
Yeah.
And when I originally did this, even with MarsEdit to help me, I ended up doing lots of searching. And this tech is so old that a lot of those articles have disappeared.
Wow,
and a lot of the terms have even got they mean something else now. And so it's really hard sometimes. I found a guy's blog, and I think it was an archived, like a Google cached version of a guy's blog about how the intricacies of how movable type did this when I built this the first time. And I actually mentioned it on Twitter, and I mentioned him, and he said, I cannot believe, because I thanked him, and he was like, I cannot believe this thing that I wrote 15 years ago was used by somebody today. And I'm like,
that's awesome.
It was me. Hi.
Well, now we're taking it to the next level too, and doing it live with the shortcuts process, because that's always the fun stuff too.
Mm-hmm. Nothing like you taking early 2000s technology and then writing an iOS shortcut around it.
We can tell him that we'll use Siri to post blog posts thanks to him. Mm-hmm. So why don't I just show here? I actually have some of the just the documents. That's for Python. This is just it saying you already have it in WordPress, which is nice. And then you just go to XML-RPC.php, which I did, and then it just shows me this.
That's it.
And then I guess then we can go back from the Mars edit thing, but I think your shortcuts are the best spot just to preview how to do some of this.
Show it. And I think for those who are watching this who are like, well, but I'm not going to need to do this. Does this matter? I would say you would be shocked at how many things have a web interface of some kind. And sometimes it's going to be a weird, janky PHP backend processing XML or something like that. And that's the beauty of it, is if it's got a web interface, you can control it with shortcuts. You just have to apply yourself a little bit. But if it's got a web interface to it, you can do it. You may not believe it, but if I could do this, you can do it with almost anything.
I love it. That's a motivational speech to get us started too, especially.
Believe, Ted Lasso would say, believe that you can shortcut control a web interface.
I feel like and we will just show the basics of how to make those requests too, because it's usually like creating a file and then sending it to an endpoint and then doing
there's some tricky
URL.
The whole URL processing steps in in Shortcuts are I can't believe I did that, are a little bit tricky, right? There's tricky stuff you got to do. It's not as simple when you open up that the detail view. Get contents of URL gets really interesting really fast. Even,
I mean, I have always just figured it out by like smashing it with a hammer, where I just like try each of these methods, and if it doesn't work, I switch to the next one. I still don't fully know form versus file. So
I can tell you, form is the equivalent of posting a URL with a bunch of key value pairs, basically.
Yeah.
So that's like mysite.com ? A equals 12, B ampersand, B equals 13, ampersand, C equals hello, ampersand, right? Like that's the oldest of old school ways of passing data on the web, is you pass a set of key value pairs. And that's what form is. Because the idea was, back in the early days of the web, I mean, you can still do it, but it's like you create a HTML form and it says what the values are. And then when you press the button, whether it uses the get or post method, it's just sending key value pairs.
I think that's what Notion's API does, because for GET requests, or I don't know, they just like got rid of JSON and did it all through the URLs or something.
Yeah.
Maybe I got it backwards, because they were like, it just is easier to have one instead of both, because otherwise half the time you're formatting URLs.
In the early days of the web, the difference between GET and POST is that in GET, it literally is embedded in the URL, and in POST, it puts it in a header that's sent to the server, so it's not visible in the URL, but it's still using essentially the same method. What I'm doing here is passing an XML file. So the request body is file, and then I'm sending it to a text file that I build with some smart variables in it that is a bunch of XML. And that's we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but that is what you end up happening. And just while we're at this get contents of URL block, I'll also point out the headers content-type is text/XML. This was the one that took me the longest of everything in here, which is, why is it not accepting my perfectly formed XML? And the answer was, you have to put an HTTP header in your post that says, I'm going to send you XML now, and this is how you do that. And then it worked. So
I feel like, some of that stuff is the hardest, with just like going from what developers use for terminal commands into the shortcuts interface, and just like the fact that they always know to include content type, or they always have to anyways, but shortcuts can abstract that.
Or
otherwise.
Maybe you have a tool that you're attaching that, like curl. I don't know if curl does this, but maybe you have a tool where you can just say, here's an XML file, send it to the server, and it knows that it's an XML file, so it sets content type to text/XML.
Yeah.
And Shortcuts doesn't know that.
Yeah, I wonder if they could add a file name or like file type to this to enable that.
I don't know.
Like, you
I don't know
always
how
need it. So
common it is. But this is the power of get contents of URL, is you can add any headers you want. Like any HTTP headers you that are required by the server, which is why I say that if it's got a web interface, Shortcuts can probably do something with it.
I remember just learning from Ari at Workflow that I don't know why, but just like, oh yeah, the guy who works on Coral, you can just follow him on Twitter. And I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like, I am so like of a noob with technology that it's like, oh yeah, this stuff isn't that old, where it's the guy's still alive, obviously,
Yeah.
or something like that.
The web is old, but it's not that
it's
old.
not old, exactly. So why don't we start just from the top of like,
all right,
where is this information coming from?
Okay, so I've got a couple different versions of this script. One is a text input from the share sheet. I've got another version that is originally, when I did this, I actually, because of some bugs in the text editors I was using, I actually passed the entire text of my post in a URL call to Shortcuts.
Oh, interesting.
And that was bad. And then I eventually did. Then I passed its file path in the system, and had my shortcut read from it. I've passed all of that away. It all works fine now. The bugs have been fixed, and so I basically just share my document, or in one case I have a macro that just kicks off the shortcut and passes it the text of the document I'm working on.
Okay.
And so that's what's received. It's a story that I wrote in Markdown.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. That gets passed as, in this case, this version that you're using, it gets passed URL encoded, so it has to be URL decoded. Different versions
Is that what you're doing
differently.
Here?
And then so once I've got the text of the document, the first match you see, and regular expressions, I think they're great. I think they're powerful. You need to learn them. They look really ugly, but they're really valuable. What I'm doing in these steps is I'm literally finding the Markdown title of the document, because if I've got a level 1, a Markdown head level 1 in my document, that's the headline. And so I'm just grabbing it here because I'm going to use it later. So what it's actually literally matching there is the start of the line followed by that single ampersand and a single hashtag symbol, octothorpe, and a space followed by a bunch of text in the end of the line, and match that, and then get group at index 1, which is the parenthetical for the text, and that's my match. And
what is the M?
That's a regular expression flag that is limiting matches to single line, multi-line. I don't even remember which one it is. It's an obscure regular expression flag that allows me to say, I want you to just match it on a line.
Here, I'll get my book out and look it up. No.
Yeah, I mean, regular expressions are great. It's also good to have reference material around when you use them.
Yeah, that's why. It's like I can generally see what you did after you explained it, but until then.
But I'm literally just grabbing the headline for later, and I'll use that as a smart variable later on, because now I know what the headline of the article is.
Have you ever extracted that into a subroutine to just make? Sometimes that's kind of a pain in the shortcuts.
I haven't, because I keep holding out hope that it'll be easier to handle all of this stuff in Shortcuts, and it's a single liner. I only use it in a couple of places. So
that's fair.
So let's see what's next. What's next is this weird thing that I did, and this is an example of I think good shortcut behavior, or at least better shortcut behavior. I used to have my username and password for my website in my shortcut.
Yeah, fair.
And that's bad when you share it with the world, because then everybody can post to your blog, and nobody wants that. So I have set up a thing, and I actually use this across on the Mac now as well as on iOS, and I use it in multiple shortcuts, which is I have a text file saved in my iCloud drive with my username and password. Line 1 is the username, line 2 is the password. Nice. And so what this shortcut does is it gets that file, wp-api.txt, and it splits the text into 2 lines, and the first item is the username and the second item is the password. And that's what I'm doing right in that part. It's not commented. I didn't comment this workflow at all. So sorry about that, everybody. But that's what it's doing, is it's basically getting my username and password out of a text file.
Nice. And
so I can pass this. So I work on 6 Colors with Dan Morin, and Dan uses this, and Dan has a text file with his username and password in that spot. So he can use my shortcut, and it works with his credentials.
Nice.
So that's kind of nice too.
There should just be like a credentials action that automatically adds input, or you can do like setup questions, so it overwrites that stuff. But it's still like I would be showing it right now if I had my data in there, or data jars I could use. But
yeah. I think there's room for something more that Apple could do with the keychain or something like that to allow you to grab stuff out of that. Okay, so where are we now? I think there's an if you could. I'm trying to see where you are.
Yeah.
I think what I'm doing is I'm seeing. If headline has any value, what I'm doing here is I'm basically checking on that match we did to see if there actually was a headline on the story or not. And if there is, then I set a variable. If there isn't, I bring up a dialog box that says, what would you like the headline of this post to be? What would you like this post to be titled? And set the variable to that. So basically I'm saying, I'm not going to post this article. Otherwise, default answer headline, except then
it doesn't exist. So
it doesn't exist. So originally the prompt came up every time.
Yeah.
And if it found a headline, it was entered in, and I would just hit return. And at some point I modified the shortcut to not worry about it. If there was a headline, just use the headline.
Yeah,
and don't
because you're just doing the same thing every time.
I didn't want to be asked, but it forces you to put in a title if you didn't give your story a title, because it gets really weird. I mean, you can do it, but your story should have a title.
Yeah, because like the URL is based off of it usually.
Yep.
Okay, and then is this new?
Yeah, so
is this determining if it's a link post?
No, that actually is, believe it or not, it's taking the, replace. Okay, it's stripping the headline out of the text, because if I've got a headline, I don't actually want to use it in my body text, because my body text doesn't have the headline in it. The headline field has the headline in it, so I remove that. And now I'm working on just the story body without the headline.
Oh, I see.
And then the next thing I do is I'm matching for as you said, for a link post. My method of doing this, I have two kinds of posts on 6 colors, primarily, that this script uses. A regular old post and a link post, which is like, it gets a blue headline and it's got a hyperlink to an off-site something that I'm writing about. And what I decided to do, and I talked about this on that Automators episode that I was on, is I decided that I could use a named markdown link that is basically the flag that says this is a link post. So I didn't have to. I used to like put it in the file name. I would have the file name start like link post dash whatever it was going to be, and I realized if I standardized on how I link to my link in the link post, everything else could be automated. So I have a named, on all my link posts, there is a named markdown link, and that name is number 1. It's just the numeral 1. So what it's doing here is it's saying, is the numeral 1 followed by a link in the body text? And if it is, grab the link, because that goes in a custom field in WordPress, and
put it right in here.
And and then you encode it, URL encode it in case it's a weird URL, and insert it in a fragment of XML.
Yeah.
That's going to be inserted later, because this only exists if there's a link.
Oh,
and
that's
so
what's happening.
It's creating a little fragment of
like here
of XML containing the link. And then the next step that you're going to now is
wait, hold on, sorry, I was jumping ahead.
Yeah, you are jumping ahead a little bit. So it grabs that and it's like, okay, now I've got the link. And then and there's an XML snippet for that. And then there's this other thing, which is then you also set this variable called link field to the number 2, to the link itself, and the category ID to 2. Category ID to 2 on my system is link post. Category ID 1 is post. So if it doesn't find named URL, named markdown link 1, then it doesn't set the link field to anything, and it sets the category ID to 1. So this is the point where the shortcut has determined, is this a link post or a regular post? And it's all based on if it matches the 1 in brackets followed by colon of a named markdown thing. And then I will use that later in building my XML.
So this is the main XML then?
That's it. Yeah. So now we've got creating a new post, and most of this stuff is taken straight out of Mars Edit. It's like, and you can intuit what's going on here. New post set to 1 means yes, this is a new post. And then I've got my username and password, which are being passed from the file that I've done.
And you're declaring the type of.
Yeah,
like if
XML.
This was a number, this would be number instead of string.
I think so.
Okay.
It's
again,
I'm just aping the XML format that I know that is required here. Comment status closed. I don't have comments on my site, but I just put it in there because it seems to want it. Post status draft. I've decided not to auto post anything.
Probably smart.
And instead, what it does is you'll see at the end of the shortcut is it opens a window. It opens a browser window with the editor in WordPress open to that post, and then I can confirm that it all looks good, and I press post.
Nice.
I could be, it's very rare that something gets misparsed, but I just decided I don't want to chance it, so I just leave it that way. I used to have an option in my shortcut that was like, "Would you like to post this live or not?" And I was like, "No, never. Just take me to it." And then let's see what else. Post format is standard. That's a standard XML thing that WordPress wants. Post title, there's where I've grabbed the headline.
Okay.
So that's that variable. There's a thumbnail field. I leave it empty.
That's a thing. I remember talking to you on Twitter about link posts that because since I grew up in the embedded post thing, I always want that image URL from somebody else's, or not image URL, because that's then you're just hitting their server and causing them to pay for your images, right? Wasn't that the issue? So it's just like link posts. Generally, you just have a default.
Yeah, if I wanted to put
something.
Yeah, and I think this is the case where I am just telling WordPress that I don't have a thumbnail for this post at this time. I might be able to omit this XML. I have not gone through and said, could I remove some of these XML items from this file, because I kind of don't care. But yeah, theoretically, if I had a thumbnail, I could parse and find a thumbnail and base64 encode it and put it here. And I have another shortcut that does that we'll talk about in a minute. But
sure.
So if you scroll further down, terms, and again, there's sort of not much there except for category ID, and that is this a link post or a regular post? We figured that out earlier.
So I have custom terms built with, I'm trying to remember if it's advanced custom fields or if it's another one, maybe custom post types. CPT is the
you
plugin.
Should be able to access it here. I don't know everything that's accessible in the XML-RPC interface, but in this case, this is my category. That is a custom field.
Let me just show you too. It's because I think there's part of, I had to add, these are basically the different categories that I add to make a shortcut have a certain type of value that I can add in. I customized whether they show a prompt or not. But I think it shows me in here.
So I think
REST API, and I can give it my own slug and class. So something, I can figure this part out later.
Yeah,
that sounds like something in there.
The question is always going to be, does the WordPress XML-RPC interface give you access to it?
Yeah.
And that's something that you have to figure out. If custom fields, it does. It may do other things too. I don't know.
And those are separate plugins. So although maybe I could have done, I'm not going to redo it all now, but I guess I could have added the categories directly through here. Okay. But that's still, if it is going to be the case, it probably would just be I just say whatever it was, prompt, and then the value, and then as long as it matches it,
assuming
in theory,
that's wired into the XML-RPC interface, yes, that would be how it would go.
Good.
And then post content is in a CData block, which is your friend in XML. The CData block, which is sort of like two less than signs and less than sign, exclamation point, bracket, CData bracket, and then you can put anything in that file. And until you go bracket, greater than, so until you close the CData block, anything goes, and I just insert my markdown there.
So in theory, that's to if I was blogging about XML, I could put raw XML values in there and it wouldn't screw up the whole post and stuff like that.
Yeah, essentially, you can put anything HTML. Cool. You can put literally anything in there other than the closing of the CData block, which is a very specific sequence of characters, and it will just pass it on as an embedded amount of information.
I feel like that's one thing where you could mess up somehow that these were in there, and then and then just like not know why it's failing. But
so that's basically it. The rest of it is I'm doing fill in the blanks, and there is one of those things that we put in there. I don't know if we scrolled past it, but the link in the link post is its own. There it is. It's literally just a smart variable inserted in this XML, and so if it's a link post, it puts in a block, that other little snippet of XML that says here is the URL. And if it doesn't, then it puts in nothing, and there's nothing in the XML file. And that's my trick in order to sort of like have this XML file change based on the content it's sensing.
Nice. I have that with my weather report for like if there's precipitation, it'll show a separate string of text that otherwise just doesn't show up. Yeah,
exactly. Nice. And then you send it. So, you know, the classic shortcuts, you put in a URL, which is my XML-RPC, and then get contents of URL is the one we talked about, text/XML query, and you get a result.
Yeah.
And the result is, guess what?
XML.
So all I'm doing when I get the result is I'm doing a regular expression match that is finding a very particular string of text, which is a post ID. It's a string of numbers. And I know from what is going to be returned to me that this match will match the post ID, and then from that I can form a URL that is opening the post ID in the web editor for 6 colors in WordPress, and it opens it. And so in the end, what I have is I press a couple of keys in my text editor, and it asks me if I haven't written a headline. And the next thing that happens is Safari opens with the WordPress editor with everything already entered in it, and all I have to do is click publish if I want to publish it right then.
That's awesome. That's exactly what I'm trying to do with, and especially those custom fields, if I can get that information in, because then it can just get a ton of data out there.
Yeah. And again, are there other ways to do this? Like with the WordPress app or stuff like that? I mean, yes, but right, yes, if you can get them to work. You've just run into a place where you can't get them to work. And for me, there was because I was using movable type, which is a very old piece of software. There's nothing. There's no modern anything for it. And so I took the XML-RPC approach and basically, built my own blogging interface, web interface or blogging app in order to get the automation that I wanted. And so then when I went to WordPress, I was like, oh, it has an XML-RPC interface. I can just migrate it forward. But it does have the advantage of, it works, and it doesn't require me to have like another app installed or anything like that for it to work, because it's just using the web.
Well, especially for anybody using plugins, though, like that's what I'm trying to get to is the post to WordPress action in Shortcuts itself has support for custom fields, but if you have anything else beyond that, there's not a guarantee, and so you'd have to like get somebody else to build it. But this enables me to do it myself, which is cool. Or
assuming the XML-RPC interface supports it, and it should, right?
Exactly.
It should be extensible enough to support all of that kind of stuff. And if it's not, I would actually file a ticket with Automatic about it, because WordPress ought to support your custom stuff in its posting interface.
Exactly. That would be really nice, because you need stuff on top of WordPress if you're doing anything besides just a blog. Or I don't know. I don't want to make too many assumptions. So you have a couple others. I guess, is this just a simplified version of... this is going straight to
link list item is I don't use it anymore because I've merged the post to 6 colors in, so I don't think I use that was back when I was not using a single thing and detecting it with the all of that makeup. Oh no, sorry, I misunderstood. This is a shortcut that is how I start my link list post thing. So what I do is I select the text I want to quote, and I use the share sheet in Safari. and I run this shortcut, and what it does is it opens a new file in my text editor with the one named link already there for the URL that I was on, and the quoted item inserted.
Yeah.
And it, by default, it puts the title of it as the headline of, or the title tag of the article that it's in. So this is how I snip the thing I want to quote from, and then I write around it, and then I use the other shortcut to post it. So you can see that I'm using OneWriter, so it's actually creating a new post in OneWriter when I do this.
That's good.
But all it's doing, and this is a feature that isn't on the Mac, which is so frustrating, is on the Mac there's no way to share a thing from Safari and for it to know what the currently selected text is and all of that. It's just not there in Mac Safari, and it does not work on the Mac right now. And I hope it does, because it's so much more work. It's actually really hard to script Safari on the Mac to get you the contents of a selection. And on iOS, it's super easy. So this is, and I think I'm even, if you scroll up, I think I'm even doing some transforms on the, so I'm taking the page selection, and I'm doing a couple of replaces. There's actually a custom replace there where Macworld started running all of the links on macworld.com through a redirect, and I'm removing their redirect because I'm not going to play their game. So I'm just kind of like cleaning up the text there for what gets pasted in my document for me to write. That's what this thing does. Fair. It's great. It's just such a time saver, right? This is one of those examples where I used to have to copy, and it's making markdown from the page selection, so it would come across as either rich text or plain text. I don't want either of those things. I want the rich text or the HTML underlying the rich text to convert to markdown, which is what this does. So when I get it, all the links are preserved, all the style is preserved of the thing I'm quoting.
Nice.
And that's a huge benefit for me.
When you do a quote, do you like add text before? Is that what some of this?
Yeah. Well, what that's doing is that's cleanup, I think, more than anything
just
else.
To get the URL title or the title properly.
Yeah, that's right.
I see.
That's all that stuff is just to simplify the file name. Because it opens it in OneWriter, and I want a simplified version of the file name. But basically, it's just opening that, and then I do the rest.
Fair. Nice. Okay, that one makes sense.
A little quirky.
And then the image, I guess the image one was the other XML.
Yeah. So I used to do on movable type, I had a version of this upload that was straight up just using SSH to make a file upload. And I still use that for some things. That is a great tip. Like, you can actually upload your files via SSH. If you have shell access to a server, you can literally make a shortcut that uploads the file directly without having to use a client. However, that doesn't work for me on WordPress. I need to upload it into the WordPress database. And so I modified my posting script using XML-RPC to build this, which is an image upload XML file, which requires me to, what this does is it resizes it. If it's horizontal or vertical, it calculates out which one it is. It resizes it to the standard for my site. So 1360 wide or 720 wide if it's a half size kind of on a it's vertical and it's going to be pulled to the right wrapped around text. So it resizes it and saves out a JPEG, converts it to base 64, and then what I mentioned earlier, here's the payoff. You can just say here's an image, base 64, boom, and you literally just load in. So I'm putting in the file name and stuff, and then you just shove a base 64 image into this XML file and send it up via XML-RPC, and it takes it.
That's awesome.
I have a script on the Mac that does the same thing. So if I have an image, in fact, I have the new version of BBEdit. Also has a script attachment point for when you drag an image into a markdown file, it will optionally run a script. And so I have adapted my script that I used to use to just right click on an image and say upload. And I still do that occasionally. And it resizes it, sends it up using the XML-RPC interface. But now when I'm in BBEdit, I can literally drag an image into my story. And the moment I let go, the script runs, it resizes it, it uploads it via
Nice.
XML-RPC, and builds the HTML that I want in my document and inserts that HTML,
Nice.
which this script puts on the clipboard.
That's like pretty. I was trying to do something. I realized when I was uploading to iMore that I could match their file structure and just like try to create those HTML links in the markdown or in the body of my text before I even upload it, and then just paste in the URLs.
Yeah. So this down here at the bottom, that text field at the
yeah.
very bottom is that, which is I'm building my the HTML that will refer in the format that I use on 6colors, that will refer to the file that we just got, because we got the XML file back. I know what file this is, and I'm going to stick that, and it's in a repeat loop because there could be more than one, and I just stick that on the clipboard. And then so I run this, and then I just paste, and that's it. I've selected an image, it goes to 6colors, I get the HTML back on the clipboard, and I just paste that into the story I'm writing.
Nice. That's awesome.
It's great. Big time saver.
It's like this is basically recreating the post to WordPress media.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It is a media upload into WordPress. And like I said, it started as something else. It was an SSH upload on movable type, but WordPress didn't like that. And so I instead adapted that uploader that we were talking about earlier for stories, and did it for this. And, originally I had a thing that was I think I used like Transmit or something, where I built a shortcut that did the resizing and then sent it to Transmit, and Transmit FTP'd it to where I wanted it to go. And so it's evolved over time, but it's not just uploading here, right? It's resizing, it's sensing what the orientation of the image is and resizing it, and then uploading it, so I don't have to deal with any of that. Because sometimes it's a photo and it's huge, and I only want it to be 1360 wide on my website. So it does that part of it. It resizes the whole thing. Nice. Or in this case, actually, yeah, it does. It does a resize. I think one of my debates was, do I want to upload the full version to WordPress? Because WordPress also can do auto resize itself, and I decided I didn't want to do that. So I resize it myself on my iPad before I send it.
It's like that's what I was kind of wondering, is like image optimization and stuff like that. I guess you're kind of just doing that yourself. Instead of letting it.
Yeah, WordPress. Well, part of this is my background of being new to WordPress and not trusting it. I'm sure there is if I talk to the guys at Automatic, I'm sure they would tell me, well, the WordPress way is you upload the full quality one, and then there's a way for you to get to tell your WordPress server which size version to serve. And maybe I'll investigate that down the road.
I bet it would just be the HTML like in.
Well,
in here
I don't want
somewhere.
I don't want to. I think you have to like add on to the name of the URL of the file with a detail that basically says, I want this version of it, and that it will create that version for you. But I think my thought process here was it's more complicated, and my upload's going to be faster if I resize it myself.
That makes sense. It's just
if I'm on a slow connection somewhere, uploading a 12 megapixel photo when I really only need it to be 1380 wide is going to be a lot of extra time.
This is just what iMore does. It's like puts it in the width and height stuff, and it just figures it out.
Yeah, and so that's the question is, based on what I put in, what will WordPress do? Because what I don't want to do is serve
scale it
a huge image that's scaled down, because that's going to waste everybody's bandwidth.
Yeah.
But how WordPress handles that stuff, I'm not confident enough in, so I just do it myself.
That makes sense.
Sometimes the old ways are best. In this case, maybe not, but one of the themes of this, as we've been going through it, is expediency, and also kind of organic growth of your shortcuts. So like when you point out that I've got a thing that I'm not using in one of my if statements, it's like a little clue about how this shortcut evolved from being something different to where it is now. And in fact, it's evolved since the version that you've got. I've added a few things to it too, because they do kind of grow over time.
Exactly.
And that's part of the beauty of it.
For me, it's as much as like I figured out 90% of it, but that last 10% is just like I need to spend another 3 hours to wrap my head around exactly what happened.
That happens.
Is it just to combine that image one with this, does it make sense to upload those images beforehand and then you could
Yeah.
insert the URL instead of
So
a base64 also?
my workflow is that I do all the images into my post when I'm writing it or right when I'm done writing it. And what I decided, so I've got to refer to them, right? I've got to refer to them in some way.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the workflow for me, is I just upload them and all of that. It's possible that I could, and it's actually potentially a place for future growth, is for me to have some logic in there that finds the first image in the post, or maybe the first horizontal image in the post, and mark that as the thumbnail in some way, not necessarily by uploading it, but I wonder if there's a way for me to say it's this file that you already know. That's a potential future direction here.
Yeah.
But actually uploading the post thumbnail at this point is not something that I would do, because I would have already uploaded it. And since I'm using plain text, I can't embed the image in my story. It's going to be a reference to an image already. So that's really a vestige of, I think, of MarsEdit, which would generate a thumbnail and upload it. But I'm not doing that.
But I might want to just if I pre-upload, because I would always upload the shortcut file or the icon first, and then I don't want to re-upload the same image twice.
You might be able
to
know what the image is that goes with that shortcut, base64 encode it, send it up there, and have it be automatically marked as the thumbnail for the post. I don't know all the details of that. My way of using images on WordPress is a little bit idiosyncratic because of the fact that I came from movable type. And so there's a lot I don't know about how WordPress processes that stuff. But it's a possibility. Like, that's the beauty of it, is if you can find, assuming you can find some XML-RPC documentation, which is a real question, you can probably do almost anything.
Okay, that's good to know. I guess the last one that you had was
cross promo post. So this is a great example of me not wanting to write an article. So I write a weekly column for Macworld.
Nice.
And occasionally for other sites, but basically it's for Macworld. It used to be for Tom's Guide a little bit, and I don't do that one anymore. And so I post those to 6 colors, and it's a different story type. But I don't need to write a story. I don't need to open it in a text editor and all that, because all I'm doing is selecting the first couple of paragraphs of the story and choosing from the share menu saying make cross promo post. And then it asks me, here's what the headline is on Macworld. Do you want that to be the headline? And it lets me override it if I want to. It takes the text, it makes the XML, including what story type it is and all that, and it sends it to WordPress.
Yeah, is the story type in here? I didn't see, just briefly looking at it.
It's a number. It's hard coded because it doesn't need to be more than that.
I saw the 1. Is that it?
That I think just means it is a post. It's very weird, but there's a page URL. There's the site name. I don't know. It's in there.
Is site name also
site name's just a custom field?
Okay, nice. That's
a custom field. It's parsing that it's a Macworld URL, so it just puts Macworld as the site name.
How do you do that? Is it just like anything with macworld.com?
If you scroll up, it'll actually show you. There's a whole if then chain that says if it's macworld.com, say Macworld. If it's Tom's Guide, say Tom's Guide. And if I started writing regularly somewhere else, I would do that too. And so it generates that variable out of detecting the URL, and then it just shoots it out. And so I mean, in the end, it means that when my new Macworld post goes live, I just select the first 3 paragraphs, choose cross promo. It opens WordPress, and I press publish. It's great.
I was thinking on the back end somehow, or like I spent a while trying to take URL parameters and see if there was like a logical way to actually put the site title itself, but it's like even just the fact that Macworld, I'm not gonna lie, my brain wants to capitalize that W, even though it's not
allowed. Don't do it.
Very specific.
For a long time, Nuance was doing text to speech. Or speech to text in iOS, and
they got it wrong.
So they got it wrong. Apple had it wrong, and I complained about it to Apple, and they fixed it. And so then if you type Macworld, it would do it right. But if you spoke Macworld, Nuance's engine would put in the capital W, For the longest time, that was the case, which killed me. Believe it or not, it is lowercase.
It's very specific.
So, yeah, I mean,
there's
some future stuff like iOS 15 seems to be using a database of common websites so that when you start typing the name of a website, it starts to auto-suggest what website you are typing, which is really interesting, and it didn't used to do that. And that makes me wonder if there might be a way down the road to sort of like from a bare, is there a database somewhere where if I give you a bare domain name, you give me a normal name of what that site is called?
Yeah.
There may be a web service out there that does that even now. I don't know.
It would make sense.
Trying to parse it from titles is hard.
Safari Reader, is there like technically what? Of course, I can't drop this in. Where did that just go? Shortcuts is super buggy right now. Yeah. It went way up there. Like this can already at least do some extraction of data from here. Or no,
right.
Wait. Yeah, that should have more. The details of the article is what I'm referring to. So like they've been doing more towards that. But like you said, this doesn't even work on the Mac at all. I think it's totally iOS based. I'm still really curious how much is remaining on Shortcuts for Mac that needs to work for most of this stuff to be possible.
Yeah, the Safari, like I said earlier, the Safari stuff on the Mac is pretty. This is one of those cases where Safari on Mac and iOS are so different that it's just not going to be there this fall. And anything you're doing with Shortcuts that's based in Safari kind of doesn't work right on the Mac, and that's just how it's going to be. And they're going to have to figure out how they bring Safari on Mac and iOS closer together, because it's just not there.
Yeah. I always have that like, oh, it'll get fixed right in the main release, and that's fool's hope. That
well, I mean,
more like
broadly,
the 0.1 release.
More something. Broadly, yeah, you always hope that, but I'd say more broadly, what the Safari issue tells me about Shortcuts on the Mac is the Mac has kind of been faking it with the share menu all this time.
Yeah, totally. That makes sense.
Shortcuts on the Mac exposes the fraud of the share menu on the Mac, because so much stuff gets plowed through the share menu with Shortcuts, and they're trying to work around it with like, oh, but it's in the menu bar. But it's like, but I want to select text in Safari and choose choose a shortcut from the share menu and have it know the selection and all those things. And like on iOS, it's like, well, of course, that's how it works. And on the Mac, it does not work like that at all. And it's really frustrating. So they've got a lot more work to do there.
Yeah, all of the underpinnings there. Before we talk about that,
using their share menu stuff. What they did is they mapped other Mac technology onto it as a way of being like, oh, it's like the Mac version of the share menu.
Services, yeah.
But as the two platforms come together a lot more, it's not tenable for them to do that. They need to actually do what iOS does, or iOS and Mac need to kind of agree on a new thing that they're all going to do together. But right now, it's one of those. What they say, it's a multi-year transition. So.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, that's definitely. I'm trying to figure out how far into that we are. Before, real quick, is this category name 6? That's probably. Do you just have your theme based off of category changes how the post?
Yes,
displays? Not post type. Yeah.
I'll look it up, but yeah, every post type is a category. That's what Six Colors is based on, and everything gets themed differently based on what the category is. So, our posts are called post and they're green. Our offsite links are called offsite and they're blue. Our offsite links are orange. Those are the ones that go to like Macworld. Links are blue, and then we've got a podcast type and a sponsor type as well. So, and a member podcast type and a member type. So, and they all get different colors and different icons and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So I use the category, which has a number.
Nice.
To assign.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. Because like custom post types as the plugin, I guess that's different than custom fields. And WordPress's built-in post types that's this one up here. But even still, I think all of my stuff is built off just a post. Because their types, I don't know, they're weird and they don't let you really even see them. I think they're kind of getting rid of them. But Okay, that makes sense. So I'll probably, I think through my tool, I think I might switch it to the category for the themes because
It
I have
depends
a
on,
whole blend of custom post types and stuff. But
yeah, and there's different ways of doing it. WordPress, that's one of the great things about WordPress is there's a billion different ways of doing it. Mine, as far as I know, mine may be a very idiosyncratic implementation of WordPress.
yeah,
I occasionally get people who say, "What WordPress theme are you using?" And the answer is the 6 colors WordPress theme that I built based on the custom 6 colors design that Krista Mergen designed. But like I implemented it
yeah,
in movable type, and then I re-implemented it in WordPress, and as a result, it has some worldview that's baked into it that is not like we didn't build it around WordPress. We built it sort of around movable type, and so there are probably lots of things I do that are really idiosyncratic that you wouldn't find
yeah.
on a regular standard WordPress install.
I probably would have done it your way though. I don't know. I have a particular like I'm actually creating different types of posts that aren't even
Yeah,
blog posts at all.
and
And
I've got a
so
one size fits all, other than for our like sponsor ads and stuff. Everything else is a one size fits all where, if I go to do a post, it's got the like link field there and
yeah,
the source site thing there, and I just don't use them for those posts. I could
exactly.
segment them up, but as this whole video has made clear, I don't spend a lot of time in the WordPress web interface. I kind of don't
Yeah,
want to see it. And that's anathema to the people at WordPress who are like, "Oh no, when we just built this beautiful new editor so you can spend all your time
yeah.
writing your stories in WordPress." And like, I'm not interested. I know that means that I'm not like your standard WordPress user, but for me, I would much rather work in a text editor on my iPad or in BBEdit on my Mac and just send the results to WordPress
I
and be
think
done
that
with
makes
it.
a lot, especially though with blocks, it could fit into their vision of like using this app to send it, and then you use custom fields to add your own metadata, and then the block designs it all on the page.
Could be.
And my problem is that I had to get a whole plugin to do those custom post types and taxonomies. But if you just use the built-in taxonomy, which that's why I'm like I have a whole like cross logic of both, and even I'm curious like I guess because I'm on a network of podcasts, but like I consider that an offsite in the way that you have it as like a native post,
Right.
and stuff like that. So that's all just, this is exactly what I'm trying to do though, is I post my newsletter, I go on the podcast, I do IMAR articles and YouTube videos, all of these even streams, all of this. I don't want to sit there and format posts every
Right.
single time.
Totally.
If I can
Totally.
just like pump this in straight
Well,
to WordPress, I'm done already. So
I'll mention another thing that I automated recently is we do a members only podcast on 6 colors, and I already have on my Mac. I already have a it's either an AppleScript or an Automator, but it's ultimately it's scripting wrapped in Automator if it has to be. To get me Finder control, where I can click on an MP3 that I'm uploading to my for the Incomparable or something, and it uploads it and kicks back the URL that it lives at, and then I can
nice.
post it in the CMS. I built recently an AppleScript that for the 6 colors member podcast, when I right click on it, I choose upload 6 colors member podcast, and it uploads it where it needs to go, and it opens Mars Edit and it makes a
Nice.
new post with all the right tags, including the title, which is the date. And so it does all of these things in one step. And it's another one of those examples of me sitting there going, "Oh, it takes 4 steps for me to do this, and now it takes 1,
Yeah.
and that's better." So that's automation for you, and that's a really simple thing. But it was really to get Mars Edit involved and just reduce the amount of time I have to spend. Now, if I was doing it on iOS, I would just use this XML shortcut. But
Well, now you
on the
can
Mac,
use the Mac.
I'm using a helper app instead.
How did you get it into Mars Edit? Just through AppleScript, I guess.
Yeah, Mars Edit's scriptable. Although
Nice.
I found a bug in his Mars Edit AppleScript dictionary that Daniel Juckett had to fix for me, which is very nice. But if I was on Monterey, I would probably just use, and I probably will just use a version of one of these scripts, because they'll do it without a middleman, right?
Yeah,
It would
exactly.
just open up in the web interface and say, here it is. And for the record, these scripts, not the cross promo post script that's open right now, but the ones I was talking about earlier, they all do work on Monterey.
Yeah.
Almost unmodified. You have to get the text in either by pasting it or by writing some sort of thing that takes the text out of your document and bridging it to Shortcuts. But in terms of the actual operation of the script, on day one of the beta, I took that post to 6 color script and ran it with text, and it worked the first time. And
that's awesome.
You know, having spent more time with Monterey, I realized that I was kind of lucky.
Yeah, this other one with the, like you said, even the markdown quote wouldn't work.
Yeah, but but that one did, and that's nice. So it's a good place to start.
Did you were saying you use the Finder, like you could also have a shortcut that gets the current Finder item and those kind of things, because those actions are available.
Yeah. So, one thing that I found in the Monterey betas up to now, I don't know if the one this week does this or not, is that there are Apple scripts that work everywhere else that don't work inside of Shortcuts on the Mac right now.
Yeah.
I like scripting the Finder. I have all of my automator actions are basically like act on this file, and so they start with, you know, hey Finder, what file is it? It passes the file, and then it's like, tell me the enclosing folder path so that I can act on other things in there.
Seen the Finder actions? They have get selected files in Finder and get
in Shortcuts.
Yeah,
on the Mac. I should try that, because there are Apple script accesses to the Finder that are just refused in Shortcuts on the Mac, which is very frustrating, because it means
I wonder
that
if that's because they put them in like there's get parent directory and
stuff like maybe that. It's because it's so here's the problem though, is then you need to if you're running an Apple script, does the Apple script know? Just because there's a shortcut that knows, does the Apple script know?
Can you like place the variables in the Apple script? See, this is where like I just don't get into that. I don't have any use case too. So
yeah, so this is for me it's very frustrating right now, because there are scripts that run literally everywhere else that don't run inside Shortcuts on the Mac.
Yeah,
and
that might be
it's
the
for
case.
Basic stuff like, hey Finder, what's the enclosing folder of this file? And it says no.
Yeah.
And it literally works everywhere else. So they've got stuff to work on. But yeah, the other question is, okay, then could I take a smart variable of that and insert it in the Apple script as a property?
I feel like
would that
should
work?
I mean, those like get file in Finder and then get parent directory exists. So if that's going to be the only way, like,
or pass it through as an input, so that when it runs like on run, it takes it as all of this has to be worked out. So we'll see how it goes. But you know, for me, my Mac productivity is hugely affected by being able to click on files in the Finder and running an automation on them, whether it's uploading them or resizing them or whatever. All the stuff that I've been talking about here. That's how I do it on the Mac.
Because on just its file itself, like the markdown.
Yeah,
file.
You use the file to kick off. I mean, I've got one that for podcast workflow that, you know, you click on your reference file that has everybody's voice on a podcast, and then you pick all the other individual files that they've emailed you with their native, you know, microphone recording, and it reformats them all, syncs them all up, outputs them to a folder, puts a Finder label on them. All of this stuff happens to them, which is great. And that, you know, it's mostly just an Apple script, but Automator is sort of the bridge there, because you need to have a service, and that's where Shortcuts is going to live. At least one place Shortcuts is going to live on the Mac, which is perfect, but it's not all there yet.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm curious about. Maybe just because I just been in iPad land for so long, when it was like, oh, the services menu, I was like, I like never ever use that. And I feel like that's something that if you were into the Mac is like you use it all the time, or you've never clicked on it once or ever knew it existed.
Well, and there's, we're not going to get into it here, but like services menu is it's like oldest of old school. I think it is a next step concept that came over. And so it used to be that, and it still is, that apps can contribute services. So they're like app functionality that exists outside of the app. So like Brett Terpstra has a bunch of markdown services, and they're little files that you kind of put somewhere, but like individual apps can use that too. And then there was this big moment when Automator came on the scene, where Apple said, well, now Automator workflows can be services. And given that you can embed scripts inside an automator workflow, that has become, for me, and I think for a lot of people on the Mac, the vector for scripting is
Right click.
services are
Yeah.
available everywhere, including in the Finder. And so you build an automator action that has nothing in it but an Apple script. And now you can run your script on a file arbitrarily from the user interface in the Finder, which is awesome.
And that's like, that's what I'm just trying to figure out. It feels silly to say this so late in the summer, but it's just like, how do you even use shortcuts for Mac? I feel like for a lot of people, it's going to be through services and then a couple in the menu bar.
In the menu bar,
maybe
those
a few
are
in the dock, but
it's a great question.
Yeah. So that's why I am just curious, like, I think stuff like this, that until Mac apps really get shortcut support, a lot of web-based shortcuts are going to be the most useful, especially because tons of people do use web services that don't necessarily have a Mac base. And so now you can, I can tap into my Airtable stuff directly from the Mac.
Right.
But like kicking it off and choosing from menus is very native on iOS, and on the Mac, clicking from the little menu thing, it seems extremely weird. And so there's all these assumptions that are different.
That's why I think that they're gonna need some time to sort of pick apart the more complex stuff. Like putting shortcuts on the Mac is step one, right? And step two is going to be, what is the right thing for the share sheet, and the share icon to do. We don't
totally.
I don't know.
It should be an option at least, but how it's built is the whole question. This is why I didn't even assume we were going to get shortcuts for Mac yet, just because I figured all of the underpinnings of iOS weren't necessarily on Mac, and so now we're just kind of getting it without that happening.
I think this is a good way to do it, though, because it's going to be very clear what works and what doesn't very fast, and that's gonna, knowing the people as you do on that team, I feel like that's great feedback for them of like, and they're going to be able to. It's not all in their control, but it means that they're going to be able to go to whoever's in charge of Finder or Safari and say, this is what our users are wanting, and you have to give it to us, basically. And so I'm hopeful that will start to happen. That I think shortcuts is going to be useful on the Mac from day one. I really do. But I'm glad they positioned it as part of a longer transition, and that all the existing tools still are sitting there for now.
Especially, if they're just like not fully working yet. But that's a whole thing. Honestly, like I have that Stream Deck with the shortcut set up, and at least so far for me with my hundreds of shortcuts, like that's going to be the best way to just get to them. Did you notice? I don't even remember if I posted about this, but if you do add to dock, where you can, which doesn't have, for some reason, it's just in the file menu and not one of the share option or like the input options. But once you do that, it turns it into a .application file, and so technically you can just have shortcuts anywhere on your file system.
Interesting.
And just double click them and run them.
Okay.
But then like what's inputted, there's all that. That's why it's like
all to be determined.
And we're the ones who can create what we want to see, because in theory we're the ones that know how to use it. So I do think what should you even do for I guess you have the markdown file, not a URL, but if you're on the web, do you just copy and paste the URL, right click, and then do services, and then pass that in? Like that seems, or I guess it can get, there's a get current URL.
Yeah, and you could also use scripting to grab items from the Safari Apple script interface, and it's all kind of all over the. Here's the thing. Scripting and automation on the Mac has been kind of broken for a while, where it exists, but it hasn't been updated. And some teams at Apple have kind of gone off on their own and ignored it. Yeah. And by bringing shortcuts into the mix, it is sort of making everybody snap to attention and say, hey, we actually are on the case of user automation and you need to get involved. It's going to be a challenge for some groups. Like, I think Safari is a great example where Safari's concept of user automation is kind of 10 years out of date.
Yeah.
And on the Mac. Not on iOS, but on the Mac. And they're going to have to step it up. They're going to have to prioritize that at some point. And a lot of slumbering third-party apps as well, but even Apple apps are going to have to, on the Mac, are going to have to figure out like how they really want to approach user automation, because now they can't they can't
Ignore it.
pretend that it's asleep and it doesn't matter, because now it's an initiative that Apple is actually working on
I like that.
actively.
Because I've had like an article in my pocket for 3 years of all of the actions that Apple's own apps don't have and should add. And it makes sense that even just from a development point, I mean, I don't know about technically doing both platforms at the same time, but logically, like, how do we automate this app? And having a cross-platform story does make sense. So
yeah, and I think there's an interesting philosophical question about how many actions should be contributed by an app, because you could get super granular, and I'm not sure anybody benefits from that. But and I wrote about this, I think on 6 Colors a little while ago. Might have been Macworld, but the other shoe to drop is what is platform scripting going to be going forward, because you kind of want to do like the stuff that appears in a shortcuts block, a shortcuts action, and have those be like, there's a threshold beneath which you don't want to go, that it's just too many. But you've got the other thing, which is like what Sal is doing with Omni automation on iOS and Mac with JavaScript, and what has been historically done by AppleScript on the Mac, which is remote, deep individual control of apps. And that's a different story from, I contributed these shortcuts. And I think both need to be there in a healthy user automation ecosystem. And so there's another shoe to drop, which is like, okay, Apple, is it JavaScript? Like, it is, they added JavaScript to the Mac. It's kind of a weird implementation, but it's there. But I really would like Apple to say, hey, here is how you control apps on our platforms. And that doesn't exist yet. That's part of this process, hopefully.
Yeah. I mean, definitely not for the Mac and the level that you're, like, I'm just thinking of that new session that was like, here are the 5 types of actions for shortcuts. But that's not the level that you're talking about. That would be like
it's these layers, right? It's like, first, you got to do the basics, right? You got to have these actions. And then second, you really ought to be controllable. And it's a funny case where on iOS, that first one is what apps do, and on macOS they do the second one and not the first one so much.
Exactly.
So when those come together, like, it could be very powerful. But right now we're in a situation where some stuff on the Mac is like super scriptable but doesn't know anything about shortcuts.
Yeah.
And nothing other than like the Omni apps and some of the stuff that embeds their own JavaScript engine. Those are, the only things that are really scriptable on iOS.
Yeah. Interesting. I feel like it's like get Sal and Brett and just do a powwow of what should we have, the whole range of it too. Cause it's like,
sure, there's a lot.
Yeah. That's what I'm definitely just like, even just how it builds into actually making the shortcuts. I just have so many shortcuts at this point that it's like the proliferation of possibilities. And I don't know, there is so much like meta work around shortcuts that is still just kind of unresolved of how should you build a shortcut in these situations and stuff like that. So I feel like at least I have I think understanding the Mac side of it too is an interesting angle. And I think all this so far is definitely super helpful for WordPress, because this is a good example of just like, I mean, the post to WordPress action could literally be built off of this protocol and we wouldn't know. So like, that seems likely because it's old.
That's why I looked at MarsEdit, right? MarsEdit's been around a long time, but in the end, like, there's an API to create a front end for posting remotely. Like, it's there, it exists. If somebody wants to come up with something new, and maybe somebody is somewhere, great. But like, this is here. Yeah. It's all using standards. It's pretty clear. Yeah. You could expand this. You could document this, or you could just. I don't know what interface the WordPress app on iOS uses. As far as I know, it might use this. I don't know.
Yeah, I want to figure that out. I just thought we should just get Alex Hay to just build an app like he's been doing with Toolbox Pro. Just turns every web interface into an action, which is amazing. That stuff is so good. I loved when the guy who made Shortcutify, I was like, please fix these Airtable actions because I need this stuff. It helps a lot. Cool. I feel like this is most of what I want to talk about. I mean, I guess the other random question that I have that I'm just trying to figure out do you have opinions on where you place your windows on the Mac? Because of all those find windows actions, I want to do like Twitter goes on the right, Safari in the middle, like.
Yeah, I'm super geographic about. I have a 27-inch iMac, right?
Yeah.
And which when I use the 24-inch one, I think maybe I actually would prefer it to not be 27. Like it's big, but because it's so big, you really get into the geography of it. So I have like Slack is on the left, Twitter is on the right. The stuff I'm working on is in the center because that's, it's a big screen. So I put that stuff off, and that's where I use it. Sometimes I'll have things side by side. Sometimes they fill the whole screen if it's Final Cut or Logic or something like that. But a lot of times I just sort of put them in various places. And I do have a couple of Keyboard Maestro routines that do that very specifically, it opens a window and it resizes it and it places it in a certain place on the screen because I know that's where I'm going to want it anyway. So I might as well tell it to go there.
Totally.
But I'm not super obsessed with it.
I feel like that's a pretty logical one, especially like I feel like the Twitter on the right and like, I mean, I have my to-do list, but I mean, okay. So just to be specific,
reminders is on the left. It's not always there, but I put it. Yeah, I try.
How
to
wide
put
is
a lot
it?
Of
Is
these
it
apps,
very wide or thin and tall? Like
thin and tall.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about Slack? Is it?
It's pretty. I mean, it's full on. It's a big window, but it just lifts over on the left, so that basically, if it's obscured, I can still sort of see which Slacks have lit up with there's activity going on, and it's always there for me if I want to look over there. So it's just nice and good distraction.
What about the Finder window? That's the one that it's like in the center and like proportional.
Those are all over the place, and I've tried to do automations where I do like I open groups of them that are frequently, and I need to get back to that honestly because so often I have like two windows open and it's for two particular folders because I need to move from one to the other or vice versa. And I had some Keyboard Maestro shortcuts for that, and I've sort of stopped using them, and I need to go back to that because I spend way too much time in Finder opening windows and using the sidebar to move to the right place. And then, you turn around 5 minutes later and I have 4 Finder windows open all to the same folder. And it's why? So I need to do more with that.
Shortcuts has reveal files in Finder. So I guess that would make sense if you just had the same file already predestined. It could figure out where it is and open. Yeah, even just, I noticed when Dan was talking about I think I was asking him about the find windows actions, and he was like, why is there not a create new window action? Which is just like how you do it on the Mac, but on iOS, that's not even a concept at all. So it's like they might not have thought of that. That was funny.
Yeah, it's and I can see some of those are like nice user interface things where you're performing an action, you're saving a file out, and then you reveal it in the Finder so that you can see the output. Like there it is. There's that file.
That's true. It's like open.
No, it's going to be
almost.
I am going to enjoy watching the Shortcuts team discover even more weird things about the Mac that they didn't even realize, and about how Mac users are using it differently than how they're using the iPad and the iPhone. Yeah. That'll be fun.
It is. It's very interesting, but also because they all build it on the Mac. So like they all use the Mac and know it in ways that I would never know because of being developers. So that bridge, this is one of those times where I regret not being able to just talk to them and ask them what they thought. But yeah, cool. I feel like this is awesome. I mean, I feel like your other shortcuts were pretty straightforward too.
Yeah. I think we got it.
Is there anything like you want to see from Shortcuts or like the community too? Just I want to see more Mac people's opinions about what makes the Mac different. And
I want to see a Mac app actually embrace Shortcuts. And what I'd really like to see is I want to see a Mac app that has not embraced user automation
on iOS.
Say on a Mac app, say, now that we know Shortcuts is going to be on the Mac, that's how we're going to do user automation. Mm-hmm. Like my personal preference would be Audio Hijack, which is a tool I use all the time. It's not scriptable in any way other than using Keyboard Maestro, which I actually do, and it's a nightmare. And I've talked to those developers at Rogue Amoeba. But that would be a great example where they'd be like, we know we haven't been scriptable or controllable for years. but here's our new version and it has shortcuts support, and be like, oh yes, that would be great.
Isn't that wasn't Paul Kafas? I don't think I've ever said his name
Paul
out loud.
Kafasis. Yeah.
Wasn't he on? He was on the talk show and talked about it. I don't remember what his point was though.
Yeah. Well, I think the short
glowing.
version is Mac. when they built the latest version of Audio Hijack, they didn't put scripting in it, and then there's this question of like, well, what's going to happen? The last thing you want to do is spend a huge amount of time building an AppleScript dictionary and all these things, and then the AppleScript is deprecated, which it feels like is going to happen. So why would you do all that work if you don't know where Apple is taking this? But now you've got Apple sending a signal that this is a thing that Apple's going to do on the Mac. So now you've got an opportunity. Whether it's them or somebody else, I want that moment where there's a real Mac app that's a Mac app that says shortcuts. We embrace it. That'll be a fun
1Password
moment. So
I've been wanting their URL scheme doesn't work anymore, and I mean, at least on the iPhone they can add shortcuts.
So you talk about URL schemes. That's the funny thing, is that some apps I've seen lately on the Mac, new Mac apps, they just have given up and they just have a URL scheme.
Yeah.
Which works.
Turn that into a shortcut, and if it just does just that, I mean, isn't
right?
Seems like a lot of what Tweetbots
I'd take
are.
a URL scheme from Audio Hijack if I had to, but
yeah,
I'd rather have something better than that. But there are some apps. There's an app I use to control, because the HomeKit support on the Mac is so bad. I use an app to control my HomeKit stuff, and it's controllable by a URL scheme on the Mac. So I have Stream Deck wired up to turn my lights off and on, and it's all just a URL to the Mac app.
Yeah, nice.
It works.
That's like, I guess now you could do it with shortcuts, but even then, the control home action is like, now that's like an nice. That's like an interface from HomeKit in shortcuts on the Mac. It's like so many levels.
Well, welcome to the world of Mac automation. So much Mac automation these days is a hat on a hat on a hat, and that's just how it is.
We got
the beauty. Yeah, now we have more hats. It's great. And so you can build, like I was saying before, you can build that shortcut that runs a shell script, that runs an Apple script, that runs a Perl script, that runs a shell script, that runs a shortcut. You can do it.
Just got to get one of those going at some point, just to have it be like it's just never stops also, because it's just triggering itself.
A long time ago, like 15 years, 20 years ago at Macworld Expo, they used to have a game show where Mac experts would come on and they would have to compete to do things on the Mac.
Automation.
They would be given a task, and it would be like, do this.
Wow.
And whoever did it faster got the points for that. And I think about this, and it's like, this is the kind of thing that you would do on that game show, is build a script that runs the most different scripting interfaces in 5 minutes.
The most useless. Yeah.
Most wins. That would be pretty funny.
Maybe I'll have to host one of those on the stream at some point.
I mean, that was like a show for Relay FM.
I was going to say Adapt was like for... Does Mac Stories have a network? I don't even know, but that was, or was that on Relay? I don't even. With
Adapt was on Relay.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But yeah, nice. Awesome. Well, I feel like this is good. Yeah. We can always do this again sometime. If you ever want to like build shortcuts on I don't know. We can always. I want to make this available to anybody who does have stuff like this.
This is the kind of thing too that going through it line by line is not something that is easily done on a podcast, or really even in an article. It's kind of hard. So
exactly, it's a very detailed article, but
yeah.
Awesome. Well, I will see. I'll end up building my own and see. I'll probably.
Good luck.
I'll look up the RPC stuff, but I'll let you know if I get it all finished. And
great.
Maybe I'll do a very line by line detailed post about it.
Nice.
Awesome. Do you want to like tell people where to find you? I assume anyone watching
go to sixdollars.com. You can see a lot of articles that have been posted via Shortcut, and podcasts at relay.fm. Upgrade being the one that's probably the most relevant, and that's it.
Nice. Switch on. All right. Thanks for coming on. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Matt.
All right. Bye.
Bye.